Hello, I'm Martin Brundle, former Formula One driver and current Sky F1 commentator, and this is my Reddit Ask Me Anything. Okay, so the first question is, what has been my most memorable or entertaining moment I've had during a grid walk, and why does it stand out to me? Well, Ozzy Osbourne was hilarious back in the day in Canada. Kimi Raikkonen was quite rude. Not to me, but in the word that he chose on the grid in Brazil once, but very funny. Obviously, I've been knocked about by a few security guards and things like that. But generally, I just love talking to people on the grid. It's a unique experience and opportunity and the atmosphere, the energy that's going on down there, and then to share that with the drivers, the teams, and all sorts of people. So. Mostly I love talking to the drivers on the grid. Probably the best moment was talking to Mika Hakkinen. Literally, he's putting his balaclava on. He's on the front of the grid. It's Suzuka, and I'm saying to him, "Can you win the World Championship, Mika?" And he goes, "Yes, I can." Down it goes, gets in the car, becomes world champion 90 minutes later. And I just loved that access when everybody's full of adrenaline. How many producers or voices are in your ear during a typical grid walk, and how do you manage to stay focused? So I have 3 people in my ear. Can't always hear them. Somebody once switched my radio off that's on my belt behind me because they thought it was funny on the grid in Monaco, and I heard absolutely nobody. We lose comms. So I try to just see people out of the corner of my eye and trip over. It's car crash television on the grid. I don't know what's going to happen next, and I think the bit of feedback I get, people quite like the chaos of that. But fundamentally, yeah, 3 people are talking to me about timings and who's where and what might well happen next. But I try to wing it as much as I can. How does it feel to see your son following your career path? In what ways do your driving styles and commentary approaches differ, and where are they similar? I actually think Alex I think we're very similar actually. People confuse us. I walk through the paddock and hear some commentary, and I think, I don't remember talking about that, and then I realise it's my son. I can hear booming through the paddock because he does some F1, F2 and F3 television. I think we've got the same mannerisms and the same quirky statements. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say, but he ploughs his own furrow. He's made his own career, and he was a great sports car racer, and he does a lot of historic stuff as well now. So I'm really proud of him. He does a wonderful job, and he's just a sort of better educated, more intelligent version of me, really, when he's commentating. What are your thoughts on the upcoming 2025 Formula One season? Who do you think will be strong contenders for the World Drivers and Constructors Championships? Good question. I think 2025 could be an all-time classic Formula One season. The cars are converging. We've got some brilliant drivers on the grid. The teams have speed. They have amazing reliability. And it's going to be oh so close. I mean, Max obviously started 2024 with a lot of victories. That's given him some breathing space, but we've had 7 victors so far this season. Maybe we'll have 8 or 9. It's so close out front, and the racing's good, and it's what we want. It's unpredictable, and I see even more of the same in 2025. Do you ever find yourself imitating race car sounds in daily life? How do you unwind or joke around in such a high pressure environment? Yes, I do sometimes make silly Formula One engine sounds. I quite like that sound, but the old sounds anyway, the V8s and V10s and all the things I used to have revving away in my ears and strapped to my back. So just for fun, yeah. How do I unwind? Music. I used to fly quite a bit. I love flying. I love the freedom of that. But my passion is my motorbike. That's where, and it reminds me a bit of racing driving, because on a motorbike you have to read the road carefully at all times. You're looking through the letterbox of a crash helmet, visor. If you get it wrong, it hurts. So it's all the same feelings of being a race car driver. I just love the freedom and the solitude sometimes of being on my motorbike. So anything I like involves an engine, basically. It's as simple as that in terms of, other than, of course, my family. And anything sort of outside of that, it's going to have a revvy engine. What are your views on the development of biofuels in Formula One? Do you think there's a merit to reverting to pure non-hybrid engines in the future? So it's not out of the question. I don't particularly like the hybrid engines, if I'm honest, because they're big and they're heavy. And of course, we like purity in racing. It's all about minimum weight. So if we could get back to the V8s and V10s with biofuels, but Formula One must stay relevant, it must be cutting edge, must appeal to the manufacturers and the sponsors. It's a really fine line to tread, because when everything's said and done, we're about entertainment, and we've got to entertain people, otherwise they won't watch. And if they don't watch, we won't have sponsors, we won't have engine manufacturers, and the whole thing falls over. So we have to be entertaining. And I think the sound of the engine is an important part of that. But at the same time, we need people to turn up with the actual racing cars. I mean, a key element, a cornerstone of Formula One is you must make your own chassis in each team, and fundamental parts of that, which is good. So it's not a single make formula. And I think if we can, it will never go fully electric. It can't. We're going 50-50 electric in 2026. We'll see how that goes. I think the hybrids have been a mistake in Formula One because the cars got too big and too heavy, as I said. But let's see. We can't just put our head in the sand and go and become dinosaurs and just race. You know, where does that go back to? Should we go back to steam? You know, you've got to keep it sensible and be relevant. As someone who began racing with your feet ahead of the front axle, and that setup being considered dangerous, how did the evolution of seating positions in F1 impact your driving? Do you agree with Lewis Hamilton that the modern seating position being more forward makes the car harder to drive? Seating position is everything. Yeah, I mean, most of my era of drivers, if you survived, you limp because you smashed your legs up, because they used to put the driver right at the front of the car to counterbalance the weight of the engine and gearbox. Behind you, not much thought was given to safety. So if you crashed, you were pretty much going to break something in your feet, your ankles or your legs, as I certainly did. So it is important. I mean, I've driven, for example, Ayrton Senna's, that beautiful black and gold Lotus Renault Turbo. And it's wonderful because you can see everything in front of you. But it's not very safe. I recently drove one of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, and you're buried inside the car with the halo and the headrest and the hands device around your neck. And I didn't actually feel particularly safe. I felt more trapped. But I think the drivers these days get used to that and feel quite safe. So it's what it's about. We don't want to see people killed or badly injured in the name of sport. But I do agree with him, especially now the cars are so long. They're much longer than I used to race in Formula One. They're probably more akin to the cars I raced at Le Mans. If there's a lot going on out back in exactly how you're driving it, but it's the pedals, it's the steering wheel, it's the feedback from the car and how linear everything is that matters as well. So I'll give you a good example. We used to have a spare car and drivers used to share it. So 3 cars between 2 drivers in Formula One. And on a Sunday morning, you'd go out in the spare car in the warm-up and give it a run and then get back in your car. Theoretically, they're identical. And teams would hate you coming and saying, that car feels different to my car. Because it does. And even tiny differences. When you're going through a corner at 200 miles an hour, you notice. So everything matters when you're driving a racing car with those kind of loads going on. I'm impressed by your knowledge of current celebrities. I wouldn't be sure about that. How do you do it? Do you consume a lot of pop media or have someone feeding you info? So somewhere like Las Vegas, I think we had 72 people on a list of A-listers, celebrities coming on the grid, allegedly. Half of them don't show up, some do. They never look quite as they do when you Google them, to be honest, and never look remotely like it, some of them. And it is mildly terrifying. I have got people in my I've got 3 people talking to me about timings and who's around and what's going on generally. So I'm terrified of getting people wrong because there's a lot going on. There's so many people on the grid. You can't see the wood for the trees in terms of, I sometimes don't even know where I am on the grid, or in fact quite often, because I can't even see a racing car. There are so many people. So it's a combination of people I know, people I've read up about the hour before I go on the grid, and what's going on in my ear, and a little bit of luck, really. And as you know, I get it wrong every so often. You've just become the head of Formula One. Good idea. And can make any changes. What's the first thing you'd change? Oh, that's a good question. I think Formula One's in a pretty good place at the moment. It's more popular than I've ever known it, and I've been around 42 years. And I've been watching it for 60 when I first was at Silverstone and Brands Hatch in the 1960s as a fan in the grandstands. In fact, there were wooden boxes we were standing on back then. But so I think it's in a pretty good place. I would like the cars to be lighter and smaller and noisier, and I would go to some lengths to make that happen. The rest of it, I think, is just fine. I don't mind the sprint races. They're better than practice sessions. They're more exciting than that. So I think Formula One's in a very good place, but the cars are a bit fat and a bit heavy and a bit too big. Martin, did you realise Rowan Atkinson was doing an impression of you while interviewing him? No, I didn't. And I've not even watched it back, because I never watched the grid walks back. I know Rowan, he's a mate of mine. But I didn't realise that, I'm not sure I could hear too well. There's so much noise going on with fans on the cars, cooling them, and then they fire them up every so often. Seems to be like a disco down there these days as well. So I'm not sure I could hear him particularly well. And I'm not even sure what he did, but I think he was just mimicking pretty much everything I said. But he's one of the funniest men alive, so I'm just cool with that. Would early 90s Martin Brundle be competitive on today's grid? Yes, I would. I wasn't quite good enough back then when I was a Formula 1 driver. I was pretty handy, but not compared to the champions and the multiple winners, people like Lewis and Max and Fernando and what have you. So I hung around Formula 1 for 10 seasons as a driver. It's really hard to get to Formula 1. It's even harder to stay there. So I'm pretty pleased with that. If I knew then what I know now, I would have been hugely more successful as a driver in terms of getting more people around me, getting fitter. I thought I was really fit at the time, but I clearly wasn't. And now I see things, and having managed a driver, managed David Coulthard for 11 years, and having been in the inner sanctum of Formula 1 teams and generally around and about, I would be hugely more successful than I was as a driver. So I had the speed, and in a sports car I was pretty invincible. Le Mans, places like that, but I never quite had that confidence in Formula 1, which I think I would have today. But the amazing, you know, to be a very good world-class racing driver is one thing. The truly greats have got a little something that the rest of us didn't have, and I'm thinking Ayrton Senna and Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and so on. They just have something that you just can't learn how to do. Which circuits hurts you the most that isn't on the calendar anymore? So I quite liked Malaysia, actually, in Kuala Lumpur. That was a good track. Istanbul, I thought, was a tremendous racetrack. We did go back there in lockdown, and a few like that. I used to like Paul Ricard, for example. I mean, Jerez was a great little track. So many of them, and then I mean, I did Grand Prix at Brands Hatch, Donington, and what have you. But we have lost some good ones over the years, and we had a lot of city races over in America that were strong. But I would say Kuala Lumpur. That was a really good track, and weather used to play a big part there as well. Best Eddie Jordan story. Good old EJ. Yeah, we had some great times together in Formula 3 back in 1983. I went to see Eddie. My career was kind of over. I hadn't got any money, and he was struggling with his team, and somehow we found enough money to go racing in Formula 3. Then this kid turns up called Ayrton Senna, and it all kicked off. And we both ended up in Formula 1 the following year. Ayrton was going to Formula 1 anyway. Let's be quite clear about that. EJ, yeah, he whispers. When he's not telling you quite the full truth, he always whispers things. He goes, I can't hear you. Speak up, EJ, speak up. He's hilarious. I love to see him playing the drums. That's when he looks at his happiest, actually. It was a function last summer when he was on the drums and just going for it. Really good. And I'm not sure I can tell the other Eddie Jordan stories, to be honest, but he is every bit the character you might imagine he is. Which F1 rules or regulations do you think are outdated or unnecessary? Is there a particular rule you think should be introduced to improve the sport? I think we should ban blue flags. I think drivers have lost the skills of working the traffic, managing the traffic, as we used to have to do. So I quite like that. And now everybody has to jump out of the way, like school kids when the big boys come through in the faster cars. But the trouble is with today's aerodynamics, you might never pass the back marker. So things have changed a little bit like that. But I do think it's a skill that's been lost. I think the rest of it's been fairly well fine-tuned, to be honest. In terms of, the cars are well, they're scrutineered and they're well monitored for integrity and for safety and for legality and what have you. I think the races are a decent length. I'd probably shorten the Singapore Grand Prix a little bit like we do in Monaco. Monaco's 260 Ks. I'd probably make Singapore 280 Ks. All the other races are the first complete lap after 300 kilometres. So tweak that a little bit, but I'm calm where we are. I've never known Formula 1 as popular as it is today. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Hi Martin, the catchphrases you used during the race are great. Thank you very much. What's your favourite catchphrase and did you come up with them yourself? My favourite is a day late and $1 short. I don't know where all that nonsense comes from. I use in commentary. I like a little bit of humour to communicate. My job is to communicate with tens of millions of people around the world who take our feed. And I think one-liners and humour, people remember those little magpie shiny pieces of information. So I don't just want to be throwaway silly lines or whatever, but so I do use expressions I think people will relate to. I hope they do and remember. Hug the apex like your favourite granny would be my personal favourite, because I think everybody knows you're going to go to the white line on the inside where the curb is and hug it like your granny. So there are a number of silly things I come out with through the year, and then you can sometimes play Brundle bingo, commentary bingo when I use them. A day late and $1 short is something I got from a friend. I don't know, all the other nonsense I come out with. Do you have a favourite racing movie? I liked Ford versus Ferrari. I really enjoyed that one. And Le Mans. Le Mans was great. It's really hard, I think, to do a good motor racing movie. We've got the Brad Pitt one coming out next year called F1, we now know. Really looking forward to doing some commentary on that. It's going to have to be good, isn't it, to be better than the real thing this year, because it's been wild in Formula 1. But it's great. I love it. I love it when people want to make a movie about motorsport and then people want to go and watch it. So I like them all, to be honest. They all give the footage and the characters from the old days are just magnificent. Right, thank you very much to everybody who sent a question in, and don't forget you can watch all of the Formula 1 races for the rest of the season on Sky F1. Hope you enjoy them.